over at BangTheBook.com. We are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. We're going to have previews for all of the March Madness games. I've written up the first 4 previews for tonight and tomorrow, so you can go check those out over at the website. Also, make sure you hit up my MLB season win total guide. You can find that on Amazon, and also click through and find team by team over at BangTheBook.com. Also, my MLB season betting tips on a game-by-game basis. And hell, the Major League Baseball season starts tomorrow, so why not? Let's just add another sport to the mix. I'll update my picks and tips piece here tonight once I get a chance to actually digest the line, the matchups, and the unique atmosphere in Japan for that opening 2-game series. Parker Michaels' daily NHL picks, Kyle Hunter's daily college basketball picks, tons of stuff going on over at BangTheBook.com. As you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB200 is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the Sportsbook, 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it. All right, let's get this thing fired up here. We start things off with our first guest. That is Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. Brian, how's it going today, man?
Confused. Am I doing all of that stuff with you?
if you want.
Hello?
I think we can cram all that in a half hour, right?
We can start calling you the Roadrunner.
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on. Then, of course, Mike Trout signs the biggest free agent deal in pro sports history 15 minutes before the show. So, all of us kind of running around like chickens with our heads cut off here today, but we'll do the best we can with the program and getting you some information. And, look, it's going to be almost all college basketball the rest of the way. So let's start with the Valspar Championship down at Innisbrook in Florida, the last event of the Florida Swing. Brian, very top-heavy field here. Dustin Johnson, the 5-1 favorite. John Rahm, a little bit below 10-1. Jason Day, 11-1. Sergio, about 15-1. Webb Simpson, 18-1. And then, we're kind of missing the depth to this field that we saw last week with the players. No Tiger, no DeChambeau, no Koepka, no Rory, who won last week, no Fleetwood, no Molinari. This field took a little bit of a step back.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, if you want to draw the football analogy, this is the sandwich game. I mean, the TPC, huge letdown spot. And then next week, my favorite betting event of the year is the match play, which is an amazing opportunity to watch these guys play and then turn around and bet them again today. And, sometimes they're just, it happens. I mean, the odds makers do an incredible job across the board on all kinds of things. But you get to the match play, and some guy could win his match 4-1 the first day, and he hit 3 balls that were going OB, hit a tree, came back in the middle of the fairway, and the guy won the match 4-1, and he looks like he killed the guy, but he was lucky. And then all of a sudden, the next day you get a big plus price on a guy that hit 15, 18 greens. So I love the match play. So.
Yeah, and that's one of those things, too, where, everybody plays 3 matches in their specific pool, and then, of course, you advance if you're able to do that. A lot of golf being played in that match play event. I believe, the winner and the runner-up, they'll play, 5 or 6 rounds in that thing. So, obviously some guys taking this week off, much bigger prize pool, means a little bit more for the official world golf ranking, stuff like that. But, again, we have a situation here, sort of like what we kind of saw at Bay Hill, where this is maybe just one of those things where people don't want to bother with the course, because this is a very tough course at Innisbrook. A lot of holes that play par or higher. This is a challenge for a lot of guys that are maybe in the second tier of the PGA Tour, with the exception of the favorites.
Yeah, and you look at the top, and you wonder what the mindset is for all these guys. Man, I'm telling you, if you watched Sunday's final round from start to finish, Dustin Johnson has to absolutely be kicking himself. He was 25-1 on Sunday morning. He birdied I bet him Sunday morning. He birdied the first 2. He missed a 3-footer for birdie to go 3 under. And as that was happening, and McIlroy came back to the pack, and then he missed a 2-footer for par on the next hole, and then he made a push on the back 9. And honestly, it's, of course, that Dustin Johnson just hadn't played well over the years. So, the guy, he's just always on the leaderboard. I mean, he's a deserving favorite. But John Rahm had the lead, spit the bit. What's his mindset? Jason Day expended a lot of energy as well. You give them full marks, but you wonder if those 3 guys that were in the teeth of the discussion at TPC can come back and have that level of intensity right out of the gate and not fall behind. So it's not that this isn't an event that could feature some nice price plays. Like you'll get a guy like Carabell at 40-1. He's motivated every time he goes out there now, and seems to have one bad round, but he goes low. The Sung J M kid, again, he's learning all these courses, but you know the youth is going to have its moment at some point. Adam, I'm telling you, when Sung J M wins, 60-1s are going to be gone. He's going to be in that 30-1 range for the rest of his life, and then even shorter. And the kid's got game. But it's not that this isn't a tournament without opportunities. But the other thing is, I mean, tip of the chase, that doesn't mean we can't make money on something. The focal point's going to be on the NCAA tournament this weekend. But this one's more of a tread lightly kind of thing. And I'd still say, you know, swing for the fences with, you know, the Kevin Streelman 125-1. It's not like there's not some long shot guys out there.
Well, and what's so interesting about this tournament here, Dustin Johnson and Jon Rahm playing it for the first time, Jason Day playing it for the first time since 2013. So, you know, you want to sort of read between the lines with some of these things too, where, you know, for DJ, if he wins last week at the Players, he probably doesn't play this. But since he's pissed off, since he wants to make sure he's in good form for the match play, and, you know, we got the Masters coming up and the Texas Swing coming up, you know, wants to smooth out some of the rough edges. So he's playing a tournament he doesn't usually play. Jon Rahm collapses last week after putting that ball in the drink. He's playing an event he doesn't usually play. Jason Day playing an event he doesn't usually play. So you've got some guys here that, you know, you can sort of read between the lines and see their motivation levels, kind of try to understand why they're playing these tournaments. And because for DJ and Rahm, their first starts here at a very tough course, Day's first start in 6 years, maybe we do, you know, what you always talk about, what you did with Dustin Johnson last week, give those guys a round or two to get their sea legs, so to speak, play them going into Saturday at better prices, you know, as they have a better feel for the course, because it does help to have played these courses before, know where you want to put your second shot, what side of the green you want to look to play, stuff like that. You know, those guys don't have that full frame of reference yet. Maybe you wait a couple days, let them work out the kinks, then play them on Saturday.
No, I mean, I think that's maybe a sound rationale behind this. I would just throw another thing at you. You're looking at the guys that were deep in contention, could have won the tournament. You know, you get about 11-2, right? I mean, you get about a little over 5-1 on Dustin Johnson, and we know who he is. And he was in deep contention on Sunday. And the guy who also was there with a chance to win, and a guy that usually you can't follow a great roundup with another great round. It's rare. And that was Ollie Schneiderjans. He had the great round Saturday, and he was there deep into the back nine before the putter let him down at the tail end of that event. So if current form matters, and you're looking at Dustin Johnson and Jon Rahm and Jim Furyk's there at 30-1, guys that were deep in contention on Sunday. And then you got Ollie Schneiderjans, who was in the same fray and basically ended up with the same kind of result as those guys, and he's 80-1. You know, I mean, from a current form perspective, all right, if momentum was built last week, Ollie Schneiderjans at 80-1.
Well, and one other point I'll make here, and then we'll transition over to the college basketball side, is that you mentioned Sung J M, and this is a young kid playing a bunch of new courses. This is already his 16th PGA Tour event of the wraparound season. So even though he missed the cut last week, and people kind of say, okay, well, maybe, you know, his form is weakening a little bit. Maybe he's, you know, just struggling some. Well, you know what? It's not always a bad thing to miss the cut, because you get a couple of extra days off. You get a chance to refresh, refocus, recycle your mind a little bit. You know, that's a guy playing a ton of events, and he's a young kid. He can handle it. But, you know, maybe it's not a bad thing to miss a cut every now and then, get a couple of days off, avoid some holes, you know, and then be able to get back at it the next week. So I think that's something that I may kind of look to follow a little bit here. Guys that missed the cut the week before that are playing pretty well overall, maybe that's a good time to back them, because they did save some steps the weekend before.
And they're great. You know, some of these, like Dustin Johnson's a workout machine, right? I mean, so there are guys, they're in shape, but, you know, you expend a lot of energy, everything you're talking about when you're deep in contention like that. The other thing is a kid like, you're talking about a baby. I mean, this kid, you know, he's young. I mean, I know what I could do when I'm young. I need a crane to get out of bed. When you're young, you can refresh and rejuvenate again, and so that you got youth on your side too.
I'll throw out one name for our listeners here. I'm not sure if we'll have Wes Reynolds on the program tomorrow or not, so I'll throw out a name for you. Trey Mullinax at 115-1 here.
Sure.
Big hitter. Very long hitter. Top 10 in driving distance pretty much every year that he's been on the tour. Finished 8th last year here in this tournament. He's hit a lot of greens in regulation here this season as well. So maybe that's one of the bombers, one of the triple-digit shots you want to consider having a pre-tournament price on. And, of course, see how things set up going into Saturday. And, Brian, we'll make sure to definitely talk about the match play next week because I agree. I think there's a lot of opportunity for an event that is very unique and very rare on the PGA Tour. All right, let's talk NCAA Tournament here, Brian. I mean, obviously a lot of games, short amount of time, a lot of betting interest. We've already seen a lot of line movement for this thing as well. What are some general strategies that you look at here for the NCAA Tournament as you sort of organize your thoughts?
There's so many, but I would say this. The committee, here, I'll throw you just an instance in a game. The committee always has these subplots in the stories, right? So the first round, okay, here's the story. Pitino's kid coaching Minnesota going against Louisville, right? They always try to set the table for you on something. Remember, however many years ago, was Bobby Knight. He's coaching Texas Tech. And in the first round, well, there it is, Texas Tech playing Indiana in the second round. Okay, so there's their little angle and their little story. And there are a number of these in the tournament. And I'm wondering if right out of the gate they're giving us one because the committee always takes a lot of grief with the last four in generally reward their belief in them because they know that's the polarizing team and they're going to get pitchforked for it. And it seems like more often than not their belief in those teams is rewarded. But one that may be slipping through the cracks here, one of the first four games on Wednesday is Arizona State. And they're playing St. John's in Dayton. So Arizona State's a 1.5-point favorite. All right. Well, the next game, what's the subplot is Bobby Hurley, the coach of Arizona State, going against number 6 Buffalo. So Hurley was at Buffalo, got the program kind of off and running. He's the guy that hired Nate Oates, who's one of the hottest ticket items now in college basketball. So is the subplot, there's their first round story, Bobby Hurley versus Nate Oates and the Buffalo Bulls, and their little, all the crap they'll talk about before the game. Well, Arizona State's a 1.5-point favorite. I mean, without even handicapping the game, are they giving you a free roll that Arizona State's going to win that game to set up the little plot and the Hollywood script they want for the next game?
It is interesting to see things like that, and we kind of touched on that a little bit yesterday with some of the other tournaments with Kyle Hunter, the NIT, CBI, CIT of little brother versus big brother types of games, and
sure.
you do get spots where everything is done by design. I mean, this isn't done by accident. I know they're going to tell you, we rank teams using this metric and that metric and that metric, and then we come to a 1 through 68. Yeah, maybe, but there's some massaging of those numbers to get storylines, to get matchups, and to sort of put teams into some pretty interesting positions. And we'll kind of talk about that with the East region here a little bit. We're just going to go top down with these games. So we'll start with Duke in Columbia.
Go ahead. I apologize. Just to so not to keep bouncing back, but in that particular spot. So when you're taking here's a matchup. If they're A&D giving you that, and St. John's could beat them by 20. But you can almost envision they're sitting in the room because it's not so much that those guys are playing in Dayton. It's who did they end up having the winner go play against. And so you're thinking of the committee that they're talking about, that'd be a nice story. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it seems like more often than not those scenarios exist. But in that specific instance, you've got Arizona State, St. John's. They're playing a 9-10 game in Dayton on Wednesday, and they have to turn around and play a 4 p.m. game on Friday in Tulsa. So they're going to play, travel, do a shoot-around. We don't have a number on the game yet, but what I would recommend and I'm not doing it blindly. I mean, I don't, unless Buffalo's up 20 at halftime of the first game. I'm telling you, the bet is Buffalo in the second half of that game. You know, I hope Arizona State comes out. It's a competitive game. Buffalo rolls eight guys deep, and they come at you in waves. And I've seen these teams that play in Dayton. VCU went to the Final Four. It can go the other way. But a lot of times these guys wear it down. So I'm looking to play Buffalo in the second half of their first round game.
Well, and speaking of that, speaking of angles with the play-in games, this one in the West region, I'm sure we'll talk about this one with Brad Powers later in the show, but Prairie View A&M and Fairleigh Dickinson play the first play-in game here tonight, and the winner of that game goes from Dayton to Salt Lake City to play in altitude. And if it's Fairleigh Dickinson, I mean, they're a long way away from Salt Lake City. Prairie View A&M a little bit closer than that. But you've got this emotional first four game. You know, you get a chance to play in the NCAA tournament, maybe get the first win for your program in the NCAA tournament, and then, boom, you get to go play in altitude against Gonzaga. So that's another one of those spots where, again, look for the second half play in that type of game. And really, second half betting, I think, is a very strong tool for you overall in this tournament, especially you get an overtime game, a buzzer beater, an upset special, something like that. Those teams may ride the wave in the first half of the next game, but the second half may hit a little bit of a wall.
In the reason, and there's two things, like the on the premise that maybe they would wear down. But the other thing you got to know is that the teams that have to play the teams that played the first four in, they're preparing for two teams. They're not convinced who the winner's going to be. Other teams have had 3.5, 4 days to prep for an opponent when the teams in that first game have to literally prepare for two teams. So the first half can be a bit of a dog's breakfast. Then they can make more halftime adjustments, and they've got the fresher legs.
Well, and that's one other point we can make, too, here real quickly before we get into the games here in this region is that, with the quick turnaround, with the fact that you're prepping for two opponents, as you said, that's obviously unique to the NCAA tournament or those early non-conference tournaments, which don't mean nearly as much as this, lose and go home format. Coaching matters a ton here at this time of the year because you have to get your team to buy in and study the game plan for that next opponent when you don't know that opponent until less than 48 hours before the game. So coaching makes a big – it's not a coincidence that these ultra-talented teams always make deep runs. It's not just because of their talent. It's because their coaches are pretty damn good too.
And if I'm Mark Few with Gonzaga, right, I'm sitting there, no disrespect, and they'll say all the right things. They're winning their first round game. If I'm him, and there's no guarantee this is even what's going to happen, but if I'm Few, I'm spending every waking minute of the week leading up to the first game preparing for Syracuse. And there's no guarantee he even plays Syracuse because you got Syracuse and Baylor in an 8-9 matchup. But if you're sitting there and all of a sudden you've got 24 hours to prepare to play, and I'm not a Syracuse backer at all. I just don't, But that zone defense is a nightmare. It's a matchup nightmare, and they play it better than anybody. And at this time of year, they play it better than anybody. And that's one of the true edges. That 8-9 game, I'm not even saying Syracuse for sure gets by Baylor, but if they do, that's the kind of team that could just fits for a team like Gonzaga. So if I'm Few, 4 days out, I'm prepping for a game I may never play because that's the danger game.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a coincidence that Syracuse likes to make runs in this tournament, too, because they are a very, very hard team to play. And that brings us to the East region because Duke has a very interesting 8-9 opponent, regardless of which team wins that game. Do they get the VCU pressing defense, or do they get a UCF team that has a ton of size, which you really can't prep for? So that's kind of the thing for Coach K here, where they know they're going to beat NC Central or North Dakota State, just a matter of by how many points. They may be spending a lot of time planning for VCU, may end up getting UCF. That's a really interesting 8-9 game, not just in a vacuum, but also for Duke's next matchup.
This thing is so great, Adam. I mean, we could sit here, and you've already told us what your itinerary looks like. I mean, we could go to midnight in diving through this stuff. I would say in the East, the Yale-Louisiana State game. It opened 8.5. It's down to 7.5. I really like the over in the game. It's over 159.5. But you got LSU. How important is coaching? LSU's got an interim coach, and this Yale team is on the same page, and smart kids, blah blah blah, but they can score. And now you get into the throes of a hotly contested game deep at the end of the game, and you got an interim coach running the bench. And the question, the talent disparity certainly should be on display. And they could rally around this guy and go on a run, but it's also the kind of team that could be going home right out of the gate because there are gray areas there.
Yeah, for sure. And also, too, I mean, you're taking on either a Maryland team that, is very, very talented, has just had problems away from home, or the winner of that 11 versus 11 game tonight between Belmont and Temple. Belmont is a phenomenal offensive team, very good head coach in Rick Byrd. Temple, very experienced head coach in Fran Dunphy. Temple's been a tough team to gauge kind of throughout the season here, but also for LSU, not only are you not a lock to get past Yale, but as you look at it right now, and of course you'll get some more clarity tonight, you have 3 potential opponents in the second round, and you don't have a head coach to really help you through the process. So it's a really strange thing here in the East region, particularly in that Jacksonville pod.
And here I will, again, there's another one, the Belmont-Temple thing. Belmont's laying 3.5. When the whole world is on one side, Adam, over the course of your life, run the other way. I mean, Belmont's so good they got in, and Belmont this, and Belmont that, and it's a great offense, and it's this, and that, and all the things they say are right. But when the whole world is sitting there pointing at, everybody's on the same team. The 5-12, the 12 is going to win one of those 4 games, if not more. Yeah, but when the whole world's on one side, Temple's sitting there, what are these teams thinking? Oh, not one soul knew what you did. You're the first guy I heard say one thing about Temple. It's been the Belmont this, Belmont that for 72 hours.
Well, and that's what this tournament is. I mean, if you're somebody who's a casual observer filling out brackets, somebody spraying money around for the fun of it or whatever else, you want Belmont to win that game. And then you want Belmont to beat Maryland. Because what does everybody want in this tournament? They want that Cinderella story. They want Belmont in the Sweet 16. They're going to pick Belmont to go to the Sweet 16, beating Maryland, beating LSU, because that's the story that people want. They want to be able to say, yeah, I picked Belmont. I put Belmont in the Sweet 16. Well, you know what? Like you said, when everybody's on a team, you probably do want to go the other way.
And that doesn't mean, and the other thing is back to the generic strategy about it, at least it's something you would look for. Know this: where is the game being played? And how does the team travel and all that sort of stuff. But the one thing is, there are going to be those opportunities where you just know, other than a quarter of the crowd, or not even a quarter of the crowd that's there over the course of a pod or a region that's got 4 games in a building on a given day, it'd be, more than 3/4 of the crowd. They're going to rally around the dog and the Cinderella. So, when you say neutral court games, it's not a neutral court game for the big boy, right? Because people want to see the upset. So in the building, the Cinderella is going to have the crowd behind them. And that's got to be worth 1.5, couple of points. But it's not factored into the lot.
No, it's not. And it's also something that, as you said, it's something that you can kind of make some inferences about before the game, but as the game wears on, if you get that scrappy team that's kind of turning everyone into a believer, that crowd will turn for sure. So definitely something you may want to keep in mind from a live betting standpoint, maybe a second half thing, something like that. But let's go to these 2 games in Des Moines. You mentioned it already about the storylines here. I laughed about this one on yesterday's show. I'm going to laugh about it every time I talk about it. This Richard Pitino, Louisville, Minnesota thing. What? Man, they got a real sense of humor in that selection committee room sometimes. This is fascinating to me.
Someone will do it in a faraway place. And it'll be over, I would make it over under 15.5 times they take a picture or a shot of Rick Pitino in the crowd. And you might be safer betting that prop than the game.
I hope that is a prop. That would be awesome if that was definitely a prop. But, something else that's interesting here about this Des Moines pod is that Michigan State, and we touched on this a little bit yesterday, and, Michigan State they have a lot of skeletons in their closet here, and a lot of them that have popped up pretty recently. And that was kind of the thing was, they should be a higher seed than number 8 overall, beat Michigan 3 times, won the Big Ten tournament, which is thought to be, maybe the best or second best conference in college basketball. They run into a really difficult 7-10 matchup here, especially if it's Louisville. I think Minnesota they would have a pretty good time with. Of course, they're very familiar with them. But Louisville, and then if they get to the Elite Eight, run into Duke, feels like the committee kind of punished Michigan State a little bit for some of those off-the-court, off-the-field types of things by giving them a tough draw.
Well, but they spin it that, oh yeah, well we don't force them to travel all over the place, and if arguably they were in the discussion for the final 1 seed, then why would they be the 2 seed against the best team in the tournament? But they're making it act like, well, we didn't want them to have to play far away. I mean, they stuck knitting needles in their eyes, making them have to play Duke.
All right, so as we look at the rest of this field here, the one area we didn't talk about in the East region here, out in San Jose, where you've got Mississippi State, obviously in Mississippi, Liberty from Virginia, Virginia Tech from Virginia, and St. Louis, of course, from Missouri. So you've got 4 teams that are nowhere near San Jose going out west to have to play, and play, specifically Virginia Tech and St. Louis, play a late game at that for their usual body clock. So what about that? What do you think about teams that have this long travel here to where, look, there's going to be no crowd edge for those 4 teams unless an underdog kind of pops up. But St. Louis isn't an exciting underdog. So, what do you think about that little group there?
I like that, and on that premise, I like the under even more in the Virginia Tech St. Louis game. That's going to be a hard game for me to watch. I'm a big backer of St. Bonaventure, and they gave that game away. They had St. Louis. No way St. Louis should have beat St. Bonaventure. The game was mismanaged by the coach, who's phenomenal, but he had a bad day, and they had a big lead, and they got in foul trouble. They mismanaged it at the end. But at the end of that game, you talk about turning the clock back. It was the Jim Valvano days again, where St. Bonaventure was down 7 with a minute to go, and they just fouled every time because St. Louis is absolutely brutal at the free throw line. They're physical, and they're horrific from the three-point line. Their game is based on defense, and if it's close, they can't make foul shots. And then you pile on top of what you just said, yeah, hey, long travel, and these guys are out of sorts. But that's a game I think, low scoring. I mean, Virginia Tech is good from three-point land, and they're very well coached. But I just don't see a lot of points in that game specifically. And everything you just mentioned makes me like it even more.
So we spent a lot of time here on the East region with Brian Blessing. Head over to our Bang the Book YouTube page where he did videos for us on all 4 regions, East, South, Midwest, and West. He's also the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. Brian, how can people check out those 2 shows?
KSHP.com, the show noon to 2 Pacific. You can listen to it live, and the shows are archived at sportsbookradio.com. And I'm like you this week, bud. Whirling Dervish time. We're doing a seminar tonight at Sunset Station, a tip-off to the tourney seminar. We got great panel. It's our 5th year we've been doing this, and it's a lot of fun. If anybody's in town or coming in today, we'll be out at Sunset Station tonight at 6 p.m. And if you're coming in to watch the games, invite you to come down. I'll be doing the radio shows Thursday and Friday in the Grand Ballroom at the Golden Nugget with Tony Miller. It's an incredible venue. It's just a wild atmosphere. We'll have great guests for the radio shows. Oscar Goodman's coming by with the Showgirls. But my favorite 2 days of the year in Vegas, Adam, all the big events, all the things that are going on, to me, there's nothing better than the first 2 days of the NCAA tournament being in a book or in a venue where you can be playing the games. And I would make a recommendation to anybody that's listening to the podcast and they're coming to Vegas, wherever you may be going, when you get here, get a mobile app. Just sign up for a mobile app. You don't have to live in Las Vegas. The only prerequisite is you have to be physically in the state of Nevada when you use a mobile app. And I'd recommend go get a couple of them. because then you can shop for numbers. But you don't have to stand in line, and it's the convenience aspect of it. And people wouldn't think about getting a mobile app because they don't live here. But if you're coming here for 4 days, it's the best move you'll ever make is to get a mobile app. Go put a few $100 in a mobile app, and you never have to leave your seat. And half times are going, another game's starting, in-play wagering. I think that's a really sound, and then, I don't do this often. That's a sound piece of advice for people. If you're coming to Vegas, get a mobile app while you're here.
Very sage advice, to say the least. Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. Check out his videos on our Bang the Book YouTube page, and also follow him on Twitter at Brian Blessing. Brian, appreciate the time as always, man. Thank you so much, bud. Good luck with everything this week, and we'll talk to you again next week.
All right, and Adam, and we'll do more videos later in the week. We'll even do something from down at the Golden Nugget with a crazy crowd behind us. But after we see these first batch of games, we'll have more videos coming at the Bang the Book YouTube site.
Sounds great, buddy. Take care, man.
Have a good day.